Welcome to Griffonomics. If you're looking to understand the mechanics behind corporate transformations, you are in the right place.
Yeah, you really are.
I mean, imagine building the most sophisticated AI-driven cyber weapons for the United States government.
Right.
But your absolute biggest competitive moat isn't your software code. It's not your algorithm. It's literally the plastic ID badges hanging around your employees' necks.
It sounds counterintuitive, but it's the reality of the sector right now.
It really is. So today we are doing a deep dive into a company that is going through just a fascinating and I think, frankly, misunderstood metamorphosis in the public markets. We're talking to Parsons Corporation, ticker symbol PSN.
Yeah, and we have a ton of material to get through for this one.
We really do. We're pulling from their Q1 2026 earnings transcripts, the SEC 10K and 10Q filings, a bunch of press releases, and our own Griffonomics analyst notes. And the mission here is to generate a really granular strategic report and investment roadmap for you. We want to explore how Parsons is trying to, shed its skin.
Right, because it's a massive pivot. They are trying to move away from being a traditional billable hours engineering firm.
Which is what they're known for.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they want to become this highly scalable product as a service tech disruptor.
Yeah.
And that transition, it's never easy, especially when you have this massive legacy business weighing you down. So we're going to unpack what I call the tech pivot J-curve analysis.
J-curve. I like that.
Yeah, we're going to look at how Parsons is essentially using the predictable but kind of boring legacy infrastructure side of their house to fund these really aggressive, high-margin ambitions in cyber and space and electronic warfare.
It's like a dual-engine model, right?
Right, but right now, those engines are running at very different speeds, and it's causing some major friction on their balance sheet.
Which we will definitely get into. But I want to frame this transition with an analogy right at the top, just to clarify what's actually at stake for you as you evaluate this strategy.
Go for it.
Think of the old model, the engineering services model, as a treadmill. You have highly skilled people, but you have to keep running just to stay in place.
Your revenue is totally tied to physical labor.
Exactly. If you want more money, you have to hire more people and bill more hours. But the new model they want, the products and software side, is like building a toll road. It costs a ton of time and money up front, but once the toll booth is up, the revenue just scales.
Right. You don't hire a new worker for every car that drives by.
Exactly. The margin on that 1,000th car is basically pure profit.
And that toll road concept, that is the holy grail of their margin expansion strategy. To understand the goal of this pivot, we have to look at how they are physically transitioning from those treadmills to the toll roads.
And the centerpiece of this, the thing management was just harping on in the Q1 transcripts, is the Joint Cyber Hunt Kit, the JCHK.
Yeah, this is a huge deal. It's a $500 million sole source contract awarded by U.S. Cyber Command to a Parsons subsidiary called Sealing Tech.
And they booked $250 million of that straight into their backlog in Q1 alone. But wait, let's break this down. Why is a cyber kit such a big deal for a company historically known for, like, managing construction projects?
It comes down to unit economics. Historically, under a traditional contract, the government might pay Parsons to just design a cyber defense system.
Like a cost-plus service contract.
Right. They pay for the hours the engineers work, plus a fixed fee. It's safe, but your margins are totally capped, usually single-digit margins.
They audit everything.
Exactly. But with the JCHK, they aren't just designing it, they are moving into producing and manufacturing it.
So they actually own the product.
Yes. Management calls this a massive margin tailwind because when you manufacture a proprietary hardware and software kit, your margins decouple from your headcount.
Right.
They're projecting double-digit margins on these sales, which is just structurally impossible on standard cost-plus work.
Well, I want to dig into how they won this, because government procurement is usually this incredibly slow bureaucratic nightmare. It usually favors the giant primes like Lockheed. But this wasn't a normal bid, was it?
No, it started as an other transaction agreement, an OTA.
Can you just explain the mechanics of an OTA really quick?
Yeah, so an OTA is a special mechanism that lets the DoD bypass the traditional Federal Acquisition Regulation, the FAR.
Which is that massive rule book.
Right, the FAR takes years to navigate. But an OTA is designed to attract non-traditional contractors and build rapid prototypes. The government basically says, hey, we have a problem, show us your solution.
And they move fast. And the numbers on this are crazy. 100 companies submitted white papers. They narrowed it down to 3 for physical prototypes, and Parsons won.
Yeah, they've delivered over 500 prototypes already. They expect to produce 500 to 750 more under this contract.
But what was the technical discriminator? Like, why did they beat the other 99 companies? The sources mentioned something called agentic AI.
Yeah, and agentic AI sounds like marketing jargon, I know.
It totally does.
But in cyber warfare, it's a massive advantage. Traditional cyber tools are passive. They monitor traffic, spot an anomaly, and throw up an alert for a human to review.
So the human has the agency.
Exactly. But agentic AI means the system itself has the agency to actively hunt, identify, and mitigate threats autonomously. It doesn't wait for a human to click a button.
Oh, wow. So it's not just a burglar alarm. It's like a security guard that actually tackles the intruder.
That's a perfect way to put it. And by embedding that proprietary tech into the hardware, it becomes an incredibly sticky product.
That's right, because once cyber command operators learn this specific interface, swapping them out for a competitor later would be a nightmare.
The switching costs are enormous.
Okay, so they're building a high-tech toll road in cyber, but they're doing the same thing in space, right? Expanding this as a service model. Let's talk about the $30 million contract enhancement for the DARPA Blackjack mission.
Yeah, DARPA Blackjack is a perfect parallel here. DARPA is building this constellation of secure satellites in low Earth orbit. Historically, the government would hire a contractor to build a giant physical ground station just for those satellites.
Right, a dedicated facility.
But Parsons is flipping that. They aren't just offering engineering. They're shifting to a ground operations center as a service model, using their proprietary platform called Orbit Exchange.
What does that mean mechanically? Like, how is a ground control center a service?
It means the government doesn't build or own the physical infrastructure. Parsons already built the network. They provide the connectivity and data delivery as a turnkey commercial service.
You just pay for the capability.
Exactly. It's like how businesses don't buy physical servers anymore. They just rent AWS from Amazon. Parsons wants to be the AWS of military satellite control.
And a key piece of that network is the Spartan system. I was reading the specs on this, and I need you to explain why this is such a leap. It stands for S-band phased array, receive and transmit antenna node.
It's a mouthful.
Yeah. Now, I know what a traditional parabolic dish is, the giant bulb pointing at the sky. But Spartan has a phased array feed? Why does that matter?
Well, think about traditional dishes. They work by physically moving. They have motors, they tilt, they pan to track one single satellite.
And while it's tracking one, it can't see anything else.
Right, it's deaf and blind to satellite B. If you have hundreds of satellites in a constellation like DARPA's, you'd need a massive field of motorized dishes, which is expensive and they break.
Moving parts always break.
Exactly. But a phased array changes the physics. Instead of moving a single receiver, it uses hundreds of tiny stationary antennas. By slightly delaying the signal at each tiny antenna shifting the phase, it digitally steers the radio beam without moving the physical structure.
Wait, so Spartan takes that phased array tech and mounts it inside a traditional parabolic dish?
Yes, it's a hybrid approach. And the result is staggering. Because it uses digital beamforming, Spartan can create 8 distinct downlink beams and an uplink beam simultaneously.
Let me just make sure I'm getting this. One antenna can pull data from multiple separate spacecraft moving in different directions at the exact same time.
Yes, it is a massive jump in capability. And again, look at the business model. Parsons isn't just selling this antenna to DARPA for a one-time fee.
Right, they're incorporating it into Orbit Exchange.
They're selling the capability of the antenna as a recurring service. They own the toll road.
And they're applying this logic on the civil side, too. It's not just defense. They're monetizing city infrastructure through SaaS, software as a service.
Yeah, the filings detail a 10-year cloud agreement for Utah's connected vehicle platform, the iNet system.
And a 5-year contract with the LA Department of Water and Power for a demand response management system, which they got by acquiring a company called IP Keys Power Partners.
That IP Keys acquisition is crucial. The 10K explicitly categorizes it as a SaaS commercial business. Think about a demand response system. During a massive heat wave in LA, the utility needs to instantly reduce demand to prevent a blackout. This software automatically talks to commercial buildings and industrial facilities to lower their power usage in real time.
And historically, Parsons would have just built the physical power substation and walked away.
Exactly. But with IP Keys, they embed their software into the operational lifecycle of the grid. They convert a one-time construction project into a multi-year recurring revenue contract. They lock in a decade of predictable, high-margin cash flow.
Okay, so this all sounds incredibly bullish. You've got 10-year SaaS contracts, AI cyber weapons, phased array, space antennas. But here is the massive glaring contradiction we have to address.
I know exactly where you're going.
Right. If you look at the Q1 2026 earnings report, you see all these tech contracts, you'd expect revenue to be exploding. But the headline revenue actually declined by 4% to $1.49 billion. If they are becoming this high-tech manufacturer, why do they still look like a shrinking industrial company on paper?
This is the strategic inflection point, and it trips up a lot of casual observers. It's basically a massive optical illusion right now. To understand that 4% decline, you have to deconstruct this one massive legacy program management calls the confidential contract.
Let's look at the dollar impact here. This was a legacy, fixed-price international program with a run rate of about $350 million a year. In Q1 of 2025, it contributed $180 million. But in Q1 of 2026, only $14 million.
That is a $166 million negative delta year over year in a single quarter.
Which is huge.
Yeah, when your total quarterly revenue is $1.5 billion, a sudden $166 million hole will drag your growth rate negative mathematically, regardless of the tech business.
Now, the bearish narrative on Wall Street was that Parsons voluntarily walked away from this because it was low-margin pass-through work.
Let's clarify pass-through work real quick. That's when a prime contractor wins a huge contract, but they just act as an administrator. They hire subcontractors to do the real work, pass the money through, and take a tiny fee.
It inflates revenue but gives very little profit.
Right. So analysts assumed Parsons was purging this empty calorie revenue on purpose.
But the SEC filings completely dispel that. The 10Q explicitly states the volume reduction was a result of a Department of State reorganization issued in May 2025. They didn't walk away. The customer reorganized it.
Right. This falls under the Diplomatic Platform Support Services, or DPSS.
Which provides logistics and infrastructure for U.S. embassies.
Yes, and reorganizing a massive vehicle like DPSS means the government hits the reset button on how they spend billions. Parsons' revenue got caught in the gears of federal bureaucracy.
And the CFO, Matt Ophelos, completely contradicted the low-margin myth. He said on the record this was an accretive contract with margins higher than their standard federal work. They were the #1 awardee previously, and they're bidding on the recompete.
So the narrative that they intentionally purged bad revenue is false, which forces us to look at the underlying health of the core business. If you strip away that mandated $166 million headwind, management claims the core business delivered 8% total revenue growth and 3% organic growth.
Let's quickly explain organic growth. It's a term thrown around constantly. It means growth from existing operations, excluding M&A.
Right.
Like if my lemonade stand sells 10% more lemonade this year because I improved the recipe, that's organic. If my revenue doubled because I bought my neighbor's stand, that's inorganic.
Exactly. So a 3% organic growth rate means the underlying engine is healthy, but the company is currently trapped in the dip of the J-curve.
The J-curve. Let's explain this because it's the central thesis here.
Imagine tracing the letter J on a graph. You start at the top left, the line dips down significantly before curling back up higher than where it started. That's a company in a massive pivot.
So the legacy revenue falling off a cliff is the downward slope.
Yes, and the replacement revenue from the new tech products hasn't fully ramped up yet to offset it.
Let's use that $500 million cyber hunt kit as an example of this lag. The filings note it's currently only in low-rate initial production, or LRIP. Why does the military do LRIP instead of just ordering them all?
It's risk mitigation. Even if a prototype is perfect, mass manufacturing 700 units is a completely different logistical beast. You have supply chain risks, quality control.
Software bugs.
Exactly. So the military orders a small LRIP batch to prove the contractor can actually run a functional assembly line before they turn on the faucet.
Right, and the CEO warned that full-scale production won't hit until the fall, the second half of 2026. They expect $50 million in incremental growth then. So it's like tearing down the most profitable wing of your hotel while the new luxury suites are still under construction.
That's a great analogy. The overall income drops today, but the blueprint is better. The problem is Wall Street hates waiting. They operate on a 90-day cycle. They see a 4% drop, they punish the stock.
Which brings up a critical question. If they're stuck in this J-curve dip waiting for the fall, how do they keep the lights on? How do they fund this aggressive strategy while revenue looks like it's shrinking?
They rely on a massive, stable industrial anchor. We have to talk about the FAA.
The Federal Aviation Administration.
Yes. It's the bedrock of their federal solutions segment. In January, Parsons announced a $593 million contract extension for the FAA's Technical Support Services Contract, TSSC-5.
Which extends their performance through 2030.
Right. And to appreciate why this is so vital, you have to look at what happened just before this. Parsons suffered a highly public loss. They lost the $32.5 billion BNTCS contract to a competitor named Peraton.
And the stock cratered 22% on that news.
Because the market thought they were losing their grip on the FAA, but the market misunderstood the division of labor. Peraton won the digital-first software automation. They are the digital architect. But the TSSC-5 extension proves Parsons is still the indispensable physical architect.
I want to dive into what being the physical architect actually means, because it hits the hard reality of infrastructure.
Yeah.
The FAA operates over 600 dispersed sites. We aren't talking about writing code in a server farm.
No, we're talking about modernizing 1980s-era radar, power systems, surveillance towers, converting analog copper wiring to fiber optics.
And that requires a massive army of humans. The filings show this is a highly labor-intensive, cost-plus contract requiring 500 to 650 dedicated staff deployed across the country.
They are essentially the landlords and mechanics of the national airspace system. Newer tech firms might have sick algorithms, but they don't have an army of field engineers who know how to safely hot swap a 40-year-old high-voltage radar power supply in a snowstorm in North Dakota.
Without accidentally grounding thousands of flights.
Exactly. It's unglamorous, but it's an incredibly deep moat.
Which actually leads us to perhaps the most fascinating revelation in the entire 10K. When you think of a tech disruptor, you assume their moat is built on patents, right? Airtight intellectual property.
But the 10K explicitly states they do not rely on patents to protect their national security intellectual property.
Which is wild.
Yeah, they actually warn investors that government contracts often grant federal agencies data rights to their IP.
Let's unpack the mechanics of that. Does that mean the U.S. government can legally take a proprietary software tool Parsons spent millions on and just hand it to a competitor like Leidos to use on a different project?
Depending on the government purpose rights clauses, yes. If the government pays for the development, they own the rights to use it across the enterprise. It's terrifying for a standard tech company.
Right. Why spend years developing an algorithm if the Pentagon can just give the source code to your rival?
Exactly. But Parsons has engineered a different kind of moat. Their ultimate defense isn't the code. It's the 4,400-plus personnel they employ who hold government security clearances.
I want to break down why that's such a barrier to entry. Why can't a competitor just hire brilliant engineers from MIT and get them cleared tomorrow?
Because the clearance process is a nightmare. To get a top-secret clearance, you fill out an SF-86 detailing every aspect of your life for a decade. The government interviews your neighbors, your ex-spouses. It takes 12 to 18 months.
And during that 18 months, the employee can't touch classified work, but the company still has to pay them.
The overhead is staggering. A competitor can't rapidly scale a cleared workforce to bid on a pop-up $500 million cyber contract. The government needs the work to start immediately.
So Parsons already has the cleared bodies in the room.
Right. This cleared workforce is what lets them win those rapid OTAs we talked about.
So to push back on the whole tech disruptor narrative, to be dominant in defense tech, you don't necessarily need the best code. You just need a total monopoly on the humans legally allowed to enter the classified room.
In the classified space, human capital is the intellectual property.
But here's the rub. If cleared bodies are the moat, Parsons can't just wait to hire them one by one. The organic pipeline is too slow. They have to buy them wholesale. Which brings us to M&A.
Yeah, M&A becomes a talent procurement strategy, and the crown jewel of their recent activity is acquiring Altamira Technologies for $340 million in cash plus earnouts.
And Altamira is a pure play space and SIGINT provider, signals intelligence.
Right. SIGINT is the interception and analysis of electronic communications and radar signals. Deeply classified work.
But the most important metric wasn't just the $200 million in revenue Altamira brings. It was the roster. They brought in 600 new employees, and 90% of them hold top-secret clearances.
That is a staggering concentration of cleared talent, and the cross-selling fit is brilliant. Altamira is entrenched at NASIC, the National Air and Space Intelligence Center, and the NSA. Parsons has a stronghold at MSA, the Missile Space Intelligence Center in Huntsville.
So it's about buying access to new customers.
Exactly. Parsons can push their legacy cyber tools into the NSA through Altamira and sell Altamira's space solutions back to Huntsville. It creates a massive cross-selling pipeline.
And this aligns with their M&A architecture. They explicitly target companies with over 10% organic growth and over 10% adjusted EBITDA margins.
They aren't buying distressed assets. They buy companies already winning, and they buy them preemptively.
Like Sealing Tech. They bought them in 2023 for $176 million. They find these founders, negotiate reasonable multiples like 9x to 13x EBITDA, and avoid massive bidding wars with private equity.
But we have to look at the financial reality of this spree. It has casualties on the balance sheet. When you buy companies, you acquire a massive amount of intangible assets, customer relationships, goodwill, and under GAAP accounting, you have to amortize those intangibles over time as an expense.
Let's do an ELI 5 on amortization of intangibles, because it really warps how profits look.
Imagine you buy a bakery for $1 million. The ovens are only worth $200,000. The other $800,000 is for the secret recipe and customer base. That's an intangible asset.
Right.
GAAP rules say you have to pretend that recipe slowly loses value over, say, 10 years. So every year, you deduct $80,000 from your profits as an amortization expense, even though you didn't write a check for $80,000. It's a non-cash charge that depresses your net income.
And we see the brutal impact of that in the Q1 10Q. This M&A spree pushed their SG&A expenses up nearly 10% year over year. It's eating up 18% of their total revenue. Just from Altamira, they took a direct $6 million non-cash amortization charge in Q1.
So while adjusted EBITDA looks like a record 10.1%, the actual GAAP net income is taking heavy fire. It depresses their official earnings per share.
But management views it as a necessary portfolio swap. They're trading the expiring State Department infrastructure contract for high-margin intelligence access at the NSA.
Exactly.
But here's where the rubber meets the road. Buying companies and ramping up hardware production requires massive cash. And when you dig into the liquidity metrics, it's not all sunshine.
No, the most alarming metric in Q1, the one that had analysts genuinely concerned, was the spike in days sales outstanding, DSO.
Let's explain DSO thoroughly. If cash flow is the plumbing, what does DSO measure?
It measures how long it takes to collect cash after billing a customer. If your DSO is 30 days, it takes a month for the check to clear. In Q1, Parsons' DSO spiked by 14 days, jumping to a massive 72 days.
A 72-day DSO is a major red flag. It means the pipes are clogged. You have to wait over 2.5 months to get paid. Now, there was a rumor on message boards that this was caused by the boring company's Dubai Loop project.
We need to debunk that entirely. The filings prove the Dubai Loop contract wasn't awarded until May 2026, which is Q2. It had zero impact on the Q1 DSO.
So what are the real culprits clogging the pipes?
Well, the lower volume of the confidential contract meant fewer easy payments from the State Department. But more concerningly, management explicitly cited delayed collections and timing issues in the Middle East.
Because sovereign bureaucracies in places like Saudi Arabia can stretch payment cycles, especially around holidays like Ramadan.
Exactly. But the deepest detail is in the statement of cash flows. Billed receivables, the invoices they actually sent, provided a $47.2 million cash inflow. They collected their bills fine. The true drain was a massive $95 million outflow from unbilled contract assets.
This requires understanding percentage of completion accounting. Let's walk through a hypothetical.
Imagine Parsons is building a $100 million bridge. The contract says they can only send an invoice after hitting specific milestones, like finishing the concrete pillars. But billing those takes 6 months, and they have to pay workers every 2 weeks.
Right.
Under percentage of completion, if they finish 10% of the bridge in January, they legally recognize $10 million in revenue on their income statement.
So they look profitable on my paper.
But they haven't hit the milestone to actually send the invoice yet, so that $10 million goes on the balance sheet as an unbilled contract asset. Revenue recognized, but cash they can't legally collect yet.
And the 10Q shows a $95 million buildup of these unbilled assets in Q1 alone. Where is all this work piling up?
Management said it was driven by delayed milestones at U.S. munitions facilities, specifically the Holston and Radford Army ammo plants. They are doing massive modernization to ramp up artillery production. They've done the work, recognized the revenue, but due to supply chain delays or missed milestones, they can't bill the government yet.
So cash is incredibly tight. The plumbing is backed up in the Middle East and at the ammo plants.
Yeah.
Which makes their next move absolutely baffling to me.
The capital allocation.
Yes. Parsons generated a negative $3.7 million in operating cash flow in Q1. They literally lost cash from operations. Yet during that exact same quarter, they spent $35 million buying back 583,000 shares of their own stock.
It is a glaring contradiction. If you aren't generating cash and your cash is trapped in unbilled assets, how are you buying back tens of millions in stock? The filings show they drained cash reserves and drew $350 million from their revolving credit facility.
Which is essentially a massive corporate credit card.
Yes, they used debt to fund the Altamira acquisition, and they used debt to fund the stock buybacks.
Wait, I have to push back on this because it feels deeply manipulative. Borrowing money to buy back stock when operations lost cash. Is this just financial engineering to mask the 4% revenue drop and artificially prop up earnings per share? I mean, they beat Q1 EPS expectations, but it feels manufactured.
Let's walk through the math. EPS is profit divided by outstanding shares. If your profit drops, your EPS drops, and Wall Street punishes you. But if you buy back stock and retire those shares, you shrink the denominator.
Mathematically inflating the EPS.
Yes, even if actual net income shrank, it is highly aggressive. Management argues they are taking advantage of a stock dislocation, believing they're fundamentally undervalued due to the State Department hole.
But using a credit line while working capital is squeezed by a 72-day DSO.
It introduces significant leverage. They push their leverage ratio to 2.0x. It leaves very little room for error if Middle East payments stall further.
Which transitions perfectly into examining their exposure to these overseas projects. Let's start with that Dubai Loop project. It sounds like science fiction.
It's a partnership with the Boring Company for an underground transit network. But you have to evaluate Parsons' role. They are not taking on heavy civil construction risk.
They aren't buying tunnel boring machines or pouring concrete.
No, they are acting in an asset-light delegated program manager role, providing engineering oversight and safety compliance for a fee rather than existential financial risk.
That's a vital distinction. But the larger risk is Saudi Arabia. Management was asked about the Saudi Public Investment Fund, the PIF, which funds massive GIGA projects like NAM and the 2030 Expo.
And CEO Carey Smith gave nuanced commentary. She said the PIF strategy aligns with Parsons, maintaining their core priorities. But she didn't shy away from macro risks. She explicitly mentioned the ongoing Middle East conflict, specifically noting tensions with Iran.
Right, warning that customers might resequence or rephase work. If regional conflict escalates, funding for a futuristic eco-city might get diverted to defense. And if that happens, those delayed collections freeze entirely, putting massive strain on international cash flows and their ability to service that debt.
It perfectly encapsulates their duality. It's diverse but highly volatile.
It's almost absurd. On one side, they are building secret agentic AI cyber weapons for the NSA, and on the other, managing underground tunnels in Dubai and trying to collect overdue invoices from the Saudi PIF.
You're betting on U.S. defense budgets and Middle East geopolitics at the same time.
So bringing it all together, what's the final verdict? Let's start with the bull case.
If you look past the 4% headline revenue drop, the underlying demand is incredible. Critical infrastructure booked $1.027 billion in new awards in Q1, fueled by IIJA federal funds. They won the Roosevelt Bridge and the I-70 project in Missouri. That created a massive 1.4x book-to-bill ratio.
Let's ground that metric. Book-to-bill of 1.4 means for every $1 billed, they took in $1.40 in new orders. The bucket of future work is filling up faster than it empties.
And that translates into a record $9.3 billion total backlog. But we need to break that down. The filing shows $6.65 billion of that. About 71% is strictly funded backlog.
Meaning the government has actually appropriated the cash.
Yes, the remaining 29% is unfunded contract options.
And we have to contrast funded backlog with ceiling contracts like the $15 billion U.S. Air Force ATOC they won a seat on. When investors see a $15 billion ATOC, they freak out thinking the company won $15 billion.
Which is false. The $15 billion is the ceiling of what the Air Force might spend across all vendors over years. Winning a seat on a MEATOC is just getting a hunting license. It guarantees $0 until you win a specific task order. But still, $6.65 billion in strictly funded backlog is a long, stable runway.
It is. But we must balance that with the bear case, the liquidity trap. If Middle East payments stall or U.S. munitions unbilled assets don't convert to cash quickly, they face a squeeze. If the legacy contract winds down faster than the cyberkit ramps up, they face a revenue cliff in the second half of 2026.
And debt-funded buybacks can't hide a true cash flow crisis. Ultimately, the investment thesis comes down to a valuation re-rating. Pure-play peers like Leidos and CCI trade at a premium. Parsons is punished with an implementer stigma because they still pour concrete and pull fiber optics.
They carry civil accounting volatility.
Right. Cost-to-cost percentage of completion accounting means they are always at risk of lumpy write-downs if supply chains break.
So I have to challenge you. If they navigate the J-curve, ramp up the cyber kits, and fully integrate Altamira, do they ever shed that industrial wrapper? Or are they always going to be viewed as a construction firm with a cool cyber division?
I believe they will always retain a dual identity, and paradoxically, that's their greatest strength. The FAA radar upgrades and bridge projects are the tactical anchors providing the cash flow floor. You can't fund tech acquisitions without that boring infrastructure cash flow. The market will likely re-rate them once the confidential contract revenue hole washes out of the comparables, probably by Q1 2027. Once the optical illusion disappears, the tech growth becomes undeniable.
Which brings us to our final provocative thought for you to mull over. We've talked a lot about agentic AI, sauce models, and phased array antennas. We are conditioned to believe the future belongs to the most elegant code. But if government contracts grant agencies data rights to just take your IP and give it to a competitor, then the ultimate defensive moat isn't a patent.
No, it's not. The ultimate weapon is the human being holding the top secret clearance. The winners won't be the ones with the best standalone algorithms because those can be copied. The winners will be the companies who successfully acquire and monopolize the cleared talent pool required to actually walk past the armed guards into the secure facility, turn the machines on, and run the operations.
Risk defined, portfolio protected.